if you've been living by these invisible rules that you've not even been aware of maybe your whole life, rules that you never agreed to, but you still feel obligated to follow. And maybe you're just now discovering that you have an invisible rule book. You're not imagining any of this. And the mental toll that this takes, it adds up. I'm starting off today with a question. Have you ever reworded an email or a text because you were concerned about sounding too aggressive or upsetting somebody, but not in a way where you actually cared about upsetting or offending somebody, but because you were concerned about their response to it? Have you held your tongue at the dinner table, out with friends, at a meeting, because you didn't want to come across too opinionated? And not because you're being respectful, not because you don't want to get into a conversation about something that may be controversial, but because you don't want to deal with somebody's reaction to what you might say. Have you ever shape-shifted your ideas that you would like to share, but you feel like you need to fit someone else's comfort zone? That it's not that you're concerned about making somebody uncomfortable in, again, a polite way or in a social contract way, but because their discomfort makes you uncomfortable. None of these tactics are strategies. These are all reactions. These are all survival brain reactions. And this is what I want to talk about today, because I know so many high achieving women running households, running businesses, running offices, just out there being incredible, that feel like they have a confidence problem, or they believe they have a professional problem. Like, why can't I not take this stuff so personal? Why don't I have thick skin like everybody else in the office? Why does everybody say I'm too sensitive? When the truth is, I'm surrounded by a bunch of jerks. They, think they have a professional problem, or they think they have a too much problem, as in, I don't want to come across as too much. I don't want to take up my space. And all of this is, again, not because you're being polite, not because you are actually concerned about somebody else's discomfort because you care, but because you're worried about how they're going to react to you. These are not the problems you have. What you have is an invisible rule book problem. And in today's episode, we are going to address it. This is for every person out there who's ever toned down themselves just to fit in and avoid somebody else's response to it. Walking on eggshells, not speaking up, not saying what's on your mind, without even often realizing that you're doing it. You just feel yucky. And spoiler alert, this is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to become aware of it, to practice interrupting it in the moment and changing it. So if you relate to any of this, then today's episode is for you. Let's go.
I'm Dr. Charlie Hornes, highly anxious people pleaser turned master certified professional life coach. Learning to manage my brain was so life-changing for me that I got certified so that I could teach these incredible evidence-based practices to you. Are you ready for massive change? Let's go.
Hey friend, welcome to The Art of Managing Your Brain. I'm Dr. Charlie Hornes, and in this week's episode, it's personal because editing yourself is not just a bad habit. It is the result of generations of social training designed to keep women not only in line, but convince them to gaslight themselves into thinking it was their idea in the first place. This is what I call the invisible rulebook. And today we're going to name it, dismantle it, and give you the neuroscience-based framework to start opting out of it. All right, let's get something very clear. Most of the professionalism rules that women follow were not written by women. They were written for women, and they were designed to protect institutions, not women. Let me say that again for the women who still think that their perfectionism is a virtue, that their pretend confidence, their facade is a virtue. The rules you've been following, they're not neutral. They're protective, but they're protective of power, of hierarchy, of comfort, and not your comfort. And here's what that looks like out in the wild. Don't speak too much. Don't speak too soon. Don't take up too much airtime. Don't take up too much space. I hate hearing when people say that somebody's too much when they're referring to a woman. Now, let's talk about the brain science behind this for a quick second. I've said it a billion times. Your brain is always trying to protect you from perceived threats, right? So if boldness, truth, speaking truth to power, or you wanting to be your authentic self without caring about what other people think, if this is used to result in negative outcomes like conflict, dismissal, or rejection, guess what? Your nervous system logs that as danger, not because we're weak, because we're wired to stay safe. So when we edit ourselves, it becomes automatic, and often it's passed down generation to generation. It's unconscious. It's internalized because of what we've been immersed in our whole lives, not because we're afraid, often not even because we actually care what other people think. We don't care, but we have physiological responses when people say certain things. And it's because our brain remembers. It wasn't that long ago women couldn't have credit cards, right? It was a generation for me. I saw people that were alive when women couldn't have credit cards, and there was subjugation and women were out there fighting, and the ERA and the marching and all of these things. It's for me real life. It's for my mother, her generation. I watched her. It's for my grandmother. This is stuff that gets passed down generation to generation. Your nervous system logs that as danger. And this is some of that generational trauma that family systems talks about. And our body remembers it. If this is used to result in negative outcomes like conflict, dismissal, or rejection, guess what? Your nervous system logs that. And our brain logs these as truth. So editing yourself, that's how it becomes automatic. That's how it becomes unconscious. That's how it becomes internalized. It's because our brain remembers. And we're going to get into how to dismantle that once and for all. But before we dive into today's episode, I want to pause for a quick check-in. If you've been living by these invisible rules that you've not even been aware of maybe your whole life, rules that you never agreed to, but you still feel obligated to follow, and maybe you're just now discovering that you have an invisible rule book. You're not imagining any of this. And the mental toll that this takes, it adds up. Look, I have spent over 20 years walking with people through burnout, trauma, and reinventing themselves. And while I am clinically trained to help you understand why your brain does what it does and provide a certified spiritual counseling, I'm not a therapist. Sometimes real change starts with real licensed support. And that's why I'm super excited to have BetterHelp partnering with me this spring. And they are sponsoring some of our episodes. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform. They match you with a licensed therapist who fits your needs and your life. If the work we're doing here stirs something deep within you, something that needs more space, more breathing room, more support, or just a place to unpack what's underneath the pressure, BetterHelp makes it easier to start. You can just go to my affiliate link at betterhelp.com/art of today, and you will get 10% off your first month to give therapy a try. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/art of ARTOF. Your well-being is worth it. Here's the problem. The longer you follow this invisible rule book, especially when you don't even know you're doing it, the more your nervous system believes it's the only way to survive. Your nervous system begins to think these things are facts, that they are the way it is. That's just how it is. That's the way life is. And eventually you start thinking all of these behaviors, this sort of over editing, this, muting yourself, this silencing yourself, that these things are maturity, that your self-silencing is professionalism, that your hesitancy is wisdom. And there's something to be said for not, shooting off at the mouth, obviously, but that's not what I'm talking about. Hesitating for hesitating's sake, or for being concerned about the reaction you're going to get because of conflict or somebody disliking you or dismissal or some kind of, retribution or reprimand. It's not wisdom. It's not. It's fear dressed as strategy. So let's talk about the cost. Here's one: decision paralysis. You can't make a move until you've imagined every possible reaction. Number two, emotional exhaustion. You're managing how you feel while simultaneously managing how other people feel about how you feel. Number 3, diluted presence. You walk into rooms and you don't bring your full self, just the edited, acceptable, likable, smile more version. That's not leadership. That's not being in real relationship with people. That's that play acting again. That's that whole putting up a facade thing. And it's silently draining the very power that you've spent years trying to build. It's causing the frustration of why you can't do, say, be, act, feel, whatever, the way you want to. Now, let's be really clear. There are a ton of people out there right now that are touting this whole show up and be your authentic self thing. Okay, right. That's not what I'm talking about. There are parts of us. There are parts of just be yourself authentically that you do not need, nor should you want to bring to work or professional relationships or your first date or lunch with your in-laws. There are social contracts, levels of respect, professionalism, and intention that need planning. Just showing up, claiming to be your authentic self, and then winging it is not something I would suggest, nor am I suggesting that now. What I'm talking about is not dancing to the tune of an invisible rule book you never signed up for, often you don't even know exists, and has nothing to do with you and everything to do with your concern about other people reacting to you, as in walking on eggshells. That is definitely not being your authentic self. So let's talk real quick about why you're doing what you're doing and why it actually makes sense that you're doing it. Now, let's be very clear, and I cannot say this enough. This is not a mindset issue. This isn't a wake up and have the right mindset situation. This is a system issue. It's a systemic issue, as in it's pervasive within a system that you have been immersed in your entire life. So much of this we don't even know we're doing. You were trained to believe that in order to be respected, to earn respect, to garner respect, you had to self-monitor, that you had to watch what you said, not upset the apple cart, that you had to whittle yourself down to dance to the tune of other people's expectations about you that are rarely clear, by the way. Look, you can still show up in your knowledge, your education, your incredibly awesome self without throwing everything to the wind in the name of authenticity. But on the other spectrum, not shapeshift into something that you are not, just to make other people happy. Or worse, to avoid discomfort, to avoid reactions you have been trained to avoid, reprimands, criticisms. That's someone in your life who always has something to say, masked as feedback or masked as, I'm telling you this because I love you, or blah, 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 or I'm a straight shooter. Like, yeah, clear as kind, for sure. I probably say that every episode, but that's different than somebody masking criticism with an excuse of feedback, right? You don't have to collapse into yourself to follow these invisible rules. It's very different than flaunting your authentic, badass self. This is a systems issue, a system that has systemically taught you. And you have to fill in the blank of what these rules are. I mean, I can give you examples, but they're just very generic, right? Something you could just kind of track. For example, that in order to be liked, you have to self-minimize. That in order to feel safe, you have to edit yourself, self-edit, self-audit. Make sure you don't say the wrong thing in order to set somebody off, because then your nervous system doesn't think you're safe. So let me be the voice that interrupts all of that. What you call thinking, it's called hypervigilance. What you call needing to say it just right. That's fawn-based communication rooted in trauma-informed safety strategies. What you call just wanting to be seen as professional. That's gendered performance, coded in power, polished by fear. And again, what you really need to know is none of this is your fault. If you're ready to stop editing yourself, whittling yourself down, and giving away your own authority, then it's time to upgrade the rulebook. So here's the new rulebook. Let's call it what it is, a framework for embodying your own self-trust, as in you trust your own self to make your own decisions, and you're not doing it because you're concerned about the reactions of other people, right? Again, different than respect, different than caring about how somebody feels, different than being a decent human being. This is about editing yourself because you're afraid of responses from other people that you've been ingrained to be fearful of. So, number one, feel the freeze and move anyway. Now, that's going to take practice. That's one of the hardest things to learn. And that's the amygdala hijacking. That's when your amygdala, your survival mechanism, I mean, it's like this big, right? But it takes over and your prefrontal cortex always defaults to your survival mechanism so that you can move when you need to move. And when your brain thinks you're in danger because of whatever these rules are that you've been taught, these things you need to avoid so that you aren't reprimanded or you aren't dismissed or you aren't criticized or whatever the discomfort is that you've been trained to avoid, that's when that takes over because your brain thinks you are in danger. It takes time to recognize this is happening. And the easiest way to do that is feeling it in your body. When your heart rate goes up, when, your head gets hot, when you start to feel that symptomatology, that physiology in your body, you can start to identify that you're going into your fight, flight, freeze or fawn. And everyone's different. I'm a freezer. When you start to identify, that's when you put in that pause and you start to move anyway, because it's your hesitation. This isn't a sign to stop. It's a sign that a social script is being activated. Observe it. Pay attention. What rule are you afraid to break? What is the outcome you're avoiding? Just identify it and observe it. Do not judge it. And then we have to interrupt that by acting from authority, not from anxiety. And this is the hardest one. This will take time to learn, to identify fight, flight, freeze, fawn, whatever is your response, and then to begin to move anyway. Because it's the move anyway part, that's the follow through that kickstarts your thinking brain. Number two, interrupt the polishing reflex. If you find yourself rewriting something to death for the 8,000th time, you need to pause. You need to ask, is this clarity or control? And then sometimes you just got to hit send or walk away and come back later, reread it, and then hit send. Number three, speak from the inside out. Stop translating yourself to be palatable. You're not palatable. You're not a salad. Start practicing internal congruence over external performance. You're not here to be palatable. Number four, anchor in identity, not proof. You need to ask, if I already trusted myself, what would I do next? Then do that, even without permission. These are the real rules of leadership. These are the real rules of an autonomous woman who is not dancing to the tune of invisible rule books, but is instead making her own definitive and decisive choices, responding to situations, not out of fear of what might happen because, things happened throughout your life that taught you to be concerned about whatever reactions or responses you were getting, but instead to start to use your thinking brain and asking, are these rules that I still care about today? Do I really care if Bob in accounting has feedback for me? Do I care? And then you have to answer that for yourself. What's the worst that can happen if Bob in accounting has feedback for you? Why does it feel so terrible? What is it about the discomfort that is causing you to want to play by these rules? How can you begin to interrupt? How can you begin to build your tolerance for that discomfort? How can you practice not giving a shit what Bob in accounting has to say in his feedback schedule that he seems to have on clock with you, right? These are not rules of leadership. These are not rules of women making their own decisions. These are rules written by people for women, not by women. And the new rules that we need to create, they're written by women who are done being managed. So this is what I want you to remember today. You're not too much. You're too smart to keep following a rule book that was never written for you in the first place, at least not with your best interests in mind. It was written with the institutions in mind of power, of structure, of systems, of people and things that benefit from your hesitation, from your acting from a place of fear, from being afraid of reprimand, of criticism, of Bob's feedback, right? Those are the things that keep you small and keep the system chugging along, and you're doing the work for it. You've been editing yourself, and your brain thinks you're doing it to stay safe, to keep you safe, but it's not true. and you're not in danger. Now it's time to start expanding yourself to stay powerful. Start taking up the space that belongs to you. Start acting and thinking from a place of autonomy, decision-making, and power. All right, if this resonated with you, then I invite you to join me inside the Confidence Decision Masterclass, where we don't just name the internal rule books, we rewrite them. And I will be showing you, once this class drops, the neuroscience-based framework to build practical confidence, not performative polish. You'll get the tools, the workbook, and on-demand coaching within the class to help you apply all of these tools in real time. So to grab individual masterclasses, you just go to charliehornetscoaching.com/store. And if you want on-demand instant access anytime a brand new masterclass drops, you can join our monthly membership. Just go to charliehornetscoaching.com/VIP vault. Look, friend, if you're carrying the weight of invisible expectations and you're tired of performing for approval, don't forget that therapy is not a luxury. It's a power tool for reclaiming your own self. BetterHelp can match you with licensed therapists who get it, so you can start unpacking what you've been taught and make space for who you actually are. Just go over to my affiliate link at betterhelp.com/art of to get started, and you'll save 10% off with that link on your first month of therapy. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/art of ARTOF. So remember, you don't have to carry all of this alone. There's support, and it's here. There's all kinds of resources, and it just starts with one decision. Going to my affiliate link might be a first step. And listen, you don't need anyone else's approval to lead in whatever space it is that you are dying to take up space in. All you need is a new framework, and I can show you how. Are you in? Let's go. I'll see you next week.